Dr. Amelia Kemp, thank you so much for being with us today on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. It's such an honor to have you on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. And before we get into your personal background and your philosophical approach to health, I wanted to just ask you a quick question of um, how did you first come across the work of Edgar Cayce, and how did the ideas about holistic health that came out of Cayce's readings kind of influence you already developed in your own practice, and how you've expanded on that over the years?
Well, I think my general knowledge of Edgar Cayce, it really came. My mother-in-law was more of a fan back in the day when we were researching all different types of holistic healing with her condition. And then when I had the opportunity last year to actually visit the ARE center in Virginia, I discovered that he had written so much on mental health, and that was impressive to me. And as I dug into the volumes that he had written, I was just floored by how like minded his work and my work was, because we both came from the contention that I think optimism and hope were just very important emotions that impact the body temple and how it influences health and well being. And just understanding that consciousness, in my book, I talk about healing at the atomic layer of energy. And he understood this so emphatically that consciousness exists in that atom that I demonstrate in my PowerPoints. And so I was just so excited about his work and haven't been able to let it out of my hand yet. It's just fascinating just how wonderful he understood vibration and energy and matter. And so I'm sort of a newbie in terms of just a fan. I mention him in almost every conversation for the last year now because he was just so on it. And so I think I mentioned to Allison that in my next volume of my own book, I'm going to include him amongst the other pioneers that understood this from a holistic and vibrational point of view, because in mental health usually this type of information is left out. And so that's basically how I came into the Cayce readings.
Wonderful. Thank you. And before we dive into your kind of personal philosophy and your approach, and you've mentioned that it is very similar in the Cayce approach, in that the way you describe, interpret, and treat emotional and physical diagnosis, mental diagnosis, is very unique, and it has a lot of similarities with Cayce, which I love. But I want to get into what I love about your work, Dr. Kemp, is that you're very current with your and especially in regard to your own personal radio show, is that you love to talk about what's going on and talk about how it applies to our state of emotional mental health as it stands today. And what I wanted to ask in regards to that is, one of your recent radio shows kind of centered on the topic of, are you guided by political leaders or your own inner guidance? And I think this is such an important topic, and you did such an incredible job really touching on so many aspects that this is all about. I guess due to the political atmosphere kind of so prominently playing out in the lives of many Americans today, what advice would you give our audience as to how to better tune into their own inner guidance as we attempt to navigate politics and decide what's best for our own personal health? I know your guest on your show mentioned that the candidates are sort of representations of our states of consciousness we share as individuals, and stating that anytime we call names at the candidates and point a finger, to check ourselves rather than pointing fingers at others. And can you elaborate a little more on this for our audience?
Oh, sure. I think that, this broader point of view that we were trying to bring to the political situation, so many people are outer directed. And what I was trying to do with Sister Jenna when we were talking about that day, she was doing meditate the vote and just trying to get people to ground themselves in their own inner knowing. and I'm trusting that the source within each of us is our guide. And when we look outside of ourselves to another human being, and we think that it's in the White House, or it's in Congress, or it's in a particular candidate that's going to be able to bring us back into alignment with the fullness of who we are, that I think that we're looking outer directed. And so my show and my book is mainly trying to help people to understand that it's an internal guidance that we need to be more keen to utilizing versus thinking that another person is the source, because they share the same source that we all. It's one energy. And so when I think the world is getting so upset about, who's going to run it. I've even heard some people say if certain candidates win, they're going to move to another country, which makes no sense to me, in the sense that, wherever we are, there we are, and that it's an internal guidance system that is so uniquely wonderful in guiding us. It doesn't really matter who a political leader is. What matters is what we're thinking in our own mind and hearts, that they can't create our existence for us. Certainly, the outer environment has influences that we notice as we observe the physical world, but it's not. It's more like a I would say background material versus the foreground of what really influences a person's direct well-being is their own thoughts about what they feel they want and they desire in their life versus what they're thinking someone else wants or doesn't want for them. And so I just think that so much of what is going on in the world could be just anesthetized if we could really just realize that others don't have that type of influence over our particular well-being, that we have mighty influence over the quality of our lives. And if we understand that more readily, then we won't be so intimidated by what others think or want for us or don't want for us as being the culprit of, so much of the dis-ease that we are observing in the world.
Absolutely. Wonderful. And I guess to kind of piggyback on that, Dr. Kemp, what spiritual advice would you give to world leaders? I know it's such an interesting time that we live in right now, and I know Cayce really talked about this time as a great time of change and a great time of potential for sort of planting seeds right now that can really help to grow into a much richer and different direction with our future. And there was, of course, going to be a lot of strife and a lot of pain and suffering that was going on right now. And out of that comes a lot of potential for healing. So what spiritual advice would you give to world leaders around the world today?
I think that when it comes to trying to be a leader of the masses, understanding that so many people, as I said a minute ago, are so outer directed, that as a leader, knowing that there are those who are looking to you to make decisions for them that they're hoping is going to increase the quality of their life, that if you impart the same thing that I'm saying to the followers, that I am just a representation, just like you, that there's no difference between who I am and my connection to the source and who you are and your connection to the source, that I don't have a greater bead on the vibrational resonance that exists for all of us than you do, and help to empower their citizens to go more inward and to trust that they can create for themselves a greater quality of lives through their own thinking, and that if there's a higher vibrational thought about there being a constant available access for all mankind, not just for the rich or famous or the leaders in the world, but everyone has that same access to this same constant flow of well-being, that I think that it would take the pressure off of them as well, because so many times some of the leaders that I've spoken with, they feel this pressure. They feel that, oh God, everyone's looking toward me, and I don't want to disappoint anyone. I don't want to let them down. And when I'm having personal conversations with them, I say the same thing to them. You can't let them down. You can't vibrate for another person. So the best thing you can do is remind them of their own internal system that is connected to the source like you, versus trying to pretend that you have a greater access to influence their life. And so I think that if mankind would stop looking towards leaders, we all have, I just look at it as jobs. One may be to help us, and I think we do a wonderful job as mankind, as we do, to try to take care of each other so much. And so, but the political leaders are trying to make sure our social well-being is intact, whereas religious leaders, like myself, we're trying to make sure spirituality is intact. And then there are those who deal with physical health, and they're making sure that's intact. I mean, we have something for everyone. And so I think that when we create a hierarchy that makes leaders feel that, or the rich and famous feel that they are more important, and that the masses are just mere mortals and have very little say so over their own quality of life, that gets confusing. And if we could level the playing field where everyone can see that we're all playing a part that's equal, that it's not that kind of hierarchy, then leaders wouldn't have to feel the pressure. And then I don't think they would get caught up so much in these debates as to who's right or who's wrong. It would be more of an acceptance of the diversity of life, and that we're all coming from different places. And so I think that would be all that I would be able to offer any particular world leader that has responsibility for governments.
Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful advice. Thank you. And now, before we get too far ahead in the current affairs, I just wanted to ask you those questions, and I have a few more because I love your opinion on it, and your approach is such an incredible universal approach that I think is so needed today, as there's so many divides that are going on when you think about the political arena right now. But I want to take a step back, Dr. Amelia Kemp here, and talk about your book, which is From Psychotherapy to Psychotherapy. And I want to get you to explain a little bit more what that entails. You, in your book, are the first psychotherapists to offer the world an alternative way to describe, interpret, and treat all 170 mental and emotional diagnoses. And could you explain for our audience what you mean by kind of breaking those down for us, and beginning with the alternative and holistic way in which you describe mental and emotional diagnosis? I love this because Cayce's description of how he described, interpreted, and treated these diagnoses, it was very much an alternative approach. And I love that you have really tapped into that and given it your own flavor. So can you please give us a little insight as to how you describe mental emotional diagnoses and how that's different from the norm?
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. Cayce understood this emphatically on one of his statements, that disease starts, and he hyphenates the words like most metaphysicians we do, that dis-ease starts when one part of the body draws energy from another part. And so understanding that he's stating that one portion of an organism can become overcharged with the creative life force, that's what starts some of these blockages and when we're imbalanced. And so in my book, what I'm saying, I think how we describe mental and emotional diagnosis is crucial, because the medical model describes these manifestations as disorders, whereas sacred therapy is my attempt to remove the pathology and stigma and help people understand their intrinsic value and worth, and that never changes. So in my book, I call these reactions versus disorders, because that means that something has gotten out of alignment. This is what he's talking about. Cayce's talking about in terms of this dis-ease is a misalignment is the term I'm using here. And so when something gets out of alignment, it's a reaction, because I don't believe that God, the creator of all that there is, makes mistakes. And so God did not create the universe and us within it with disorders. Everything comes into being the same way, whether it is dis-ease or well-being. And so when something happens, especially mentally or emotionally, it's usually because of something within one of our threefold being getting out of alignment. And so this is why in my book I say you're not sick, you're sacred. And so anything that has gone out of alignment can generally come back into alignment when we are using these holistic approaches. And so how we interpret it, that's how describing it. So not describing it as a disorder and instead as a reaction or a divine intention. It can be in a divine intention if someone was born with something. Oftentimes when I'm lecturing, people say, yeah, but I was born with this or I had this all my life. And I'm saying, well, if you were born with it, then perhaps it was a sacred agreement that you and the creative source made in this carnation, and that you came forth to demonstrate that you could still tap into well-being despite whatever it is that has manifested, or that you're going to just live part of your life or all of your physical life journey in this time on that. So how we interpret, though, interpreting is about the meaning that we're attaching to the manifestation. And this impacts the person's belief and their ability to realign. Because so many times, having been a clinician now for 20 years, people come in my office and they'll be so downhearted in telling me that they've been diagnosed with a specific mental or emotional diagnosis, and their self-esteem has just been eradicated because they feel so lowly because of the meaning that's been attached to that particular name. The stigma has just really added to their distress. And so when we can interpret it from a much more positive way that I give it in the book, I see people come back into alignment almost in a first session when I tell them, you know, you're not, just that statement, you're not sick, you're sacred. It's amazing how they sit up a little straighter. They just feel like, really? You mean I'm okay? You mean I'm not crazy? And I'm like, no, you're not crazy. And so when they hear it from a clinician, I mean, they're used to hearing it from ministers sometimes, and they thought it was more of a pep talk. But when they hear it from a clinician, it really adds to their belief that they can and will come back into a place of alignment. And this is another point here that I loved about Cayce's work, that he understood that too. He was saying emphatically that people needed to expect healing. He understood the value of optimism and hope. And that's, my book is really all about hope. It's reinstilling hope to let people know that they can realign with the divine. And so this is where how we describe things, how we interpret them, impacts now how we treat them. Like Tilliard Descharnes, when he said that we're spiritual beings having this physical experience, sacred therapy understands that we have to treat the whole person. And so many of my colleagues in the medical model were leaving the spiritual aspects of treating mental and emotional diagnosis out of the treatment plan. I mean, unless it was bereavement or grief, and even then it was only the stages of grief. They weren't getting into this energetic basis, the atomic layer of energy, and helping people understand this spiritual matrix that we all come forth with, and how that creates thought, and that thoughts are things, and that thought is matter, and that it can be changed, and that it's not static. So oftentimes people are diagnosed with depression or bipolar or this or that, and it's like this stamps on their forehead like it's a permanence, versus it understanding that this is a very fluid thing that's moving because we're vibrational beings, and that it's not a catch-all, and that it can be changed and it can be realigned and healed. And so my book has, the contribution I think I make, standing on the shoulders of so many pioneers like Cayce, is that I've reinstilled hope and allowed people to understand the holistic way that we are as beings, and that mental health should not have been left out of that understanding, and that we can realign. And I've seen it so often that that's why I had to end up writing a book about it, standing out from my colleagues who thought I was crazy to go on record stating this energy, vibration, and matter. They just thought, like, really, you're going to say this out loud? You know, they may throw you out of the field here. But sometimes we have to end up speaking our truth, because I saw, even in my own personal experience before becoming a therapist, how these holistic paradigms is what healed me and brought me back into alignment and relieved me of my own personal depression and anxiety that I had had. And so I know it works emphatically, just as I'm the first to say in my book that holistic healing remedies that are herbals can also be effective depending on the degree of misalignment of a person, where as that's unheard of in mental health. They want you to prescribe psychotropics, period, and forget about herbal remedies. But I think that when it comes to herbal remedies, they honor this circle of life. And it's a reverence that's perceived as a compatibility with the body temple. And I think that's why it's effective. Now, naturally, something like suicidal ideation, something very sincere, herbal remedies generally are not as effective, only because the NIH and the places that have to approve them, they won't allow the dosage to be as strong as a psychotropic. So I was telling someone recently, I would love to see the research of them increasing the dosage of herbal remedies and compare that to psychotropics. But because we're not comparing apples to apples yet. But as it stands, for mild to moderate, herbal remedies have been very effective. I've seen it with many of my clients, how that was very helpful and without the side effects of the psychotropics. And so, and I'm not against psychotropics, I prescribe those too when it's necessary or indicated, but I think it should be a last resort. You know, that the body temple does have a way of realigning if we are patient and willing to utilize these things. You know, so I hope
Wonderful.
I feel like I just ran on with that. I may have gave you more than you asked for.
No, that's totally fine. I love it. I love it. And yeah, you were able to incorporate so many different ideas into that. And I love that. It's a real breath of fresh air to have somebody who has not ruled out all options. And your approach seems to be a truly holistic approach. And in saying that, Dr. Kemp, I love that you do include the psychotropic drugs as well as the herbal remedies. And I guess the question I would ask, because so many have kind of just stuck with one school of thought and kind of shies away or even talks down upon the either the psychotropic or the herbal. Have you found
Hmm.
that you've had more success with one or the other? Because I know Casey had a very similar parallel in regard that where he had many herbal and kind of at home remedies that were very natural and holistic, but he also wasn't afraid to talk about surgeries and taking some of the more traditional approaches when the case was a little more extreme or a little more accelerated than could just be treated with an herbal remedy.
Exactly, and this is why I've just fallen so in love with him, because and I sure wish I had known about his work with mental health earlier in my career, because I wanted to stand on the shoulders as many pioneers as possible that had some data that could validate the premise that I was coming from, because so many times, and I feel like I'm in the middle, I feel like I'm a bridge, because so many times when I'm speaking at holistic conferences, some of them do get upset with me because I am also for the psychotropics. And then if I'm at a traditional speaking at a mental health association, they get upset with me when I validate the herbal remedies. And so I feel like I'm a bridge saying, hey guys, wait a minute, you know, both of these things can be helpful. Why does there have to be a box? Why does there have to be, you know, an all or nothing approach to this? I think that we utilize everything that God has given us. And what I love about some of the work of some of the other clinicians who did subtle energy, that they were saying that even the traditional medicines are still carrying the energy too. And I love that. And I can't think of her name. She wrote The Subtle Body. I quoted her in my book, but her name is just drawing a blank right now. But she wrote the book, The Subtle Encyclopedia of the Body. And she was, in her book, she's talking about how even though we want to say that these traditional medicines are totally different from herbal remedies, that's not true, because they still carry the same energy since everything's energy. And I loved how she framed that, because I was like, that's so true. Because regardless of whether it's a compound that we feel is man-made in a studio or somebody was able to get it off a tree, the bottom line is that it carries the energy. And so even with what she's saying, even then, that means that even Paxil and those things still, in many ways, are have a herbal agent to them. So, with that, I feel that if more of, I think a lot of clinicians on both sides are. Everybody means well. Nobody's trying to hurt anyone, and I think many of the people I've met and I've talked to who are clinicians, especially the ones that I train, they got hurt by the system. And so sometimes that's made them more angry or more committed or devoted to one side of it, whatever it was they didn't like. And so a lot of times this gung ho feeling that, oh no, you know, psychotropics or the medical model, just throw it out with the baby, is just it's extreme. And vice versa, a lot of the people who are herbally driven, they don't want to hear anything about the medical model. They think that that's just toxic to the body temple, and that that's crazy, and that it's all about money. And I explain to them that no, modern medicine has been a tremendous help in saving so many lives, because some people are so far out of alignment that what it would take to bring their body temple back into alignment would be tremendously difficult for them had they not had the surgery or had they not had this or that. And so some of them recreate it, though, unfortunately. Many people keep getting the cancers back or keep getting this back because they didn't change their thought process. And so we can cut it out, but we can't change the thought. So this is why we have to do both. And so I see the medical model as tremendously valuable for us in civilization today. We're blessed at a time where we can choose and pick, and I just want people to have the choice. But I'm definitely for both. But my tendency is with my clients is to begin with a herbal remedy first if their symptomology is mild or moderate, because I do believe it is more gentle, and can integrate with the body temple easier. But if they are in crisis, I definitely skip that step because I want to bring them relief, and relief is the cure all medicine seeks, whether it's mental, physical, or spiritual. So I want to get them the relief as fast as possible. So I'm definitely open to both.
Right, absolutely. And I appreciate that approach. That's really goes hand in hand with the Cayce holistic approach, and it's really, I feel, the approach that's going to carry us into the future, because it as you talked about, it helps to release that stigma that so many carry in regards to health. And I guess in keeping with this topic here, so many people today discuss the state of our healthcare system, and so often it becomes this divided sort of debate that happens. And and we always talk about how it is affecting our personal health, how healthcare is affecting our personal health. And what I love about your unique view here is that you've discussed on your show and in your work that the best way to decrease the costs of healthcare, doctor visits, and hospital visits is to take sort of relentless personal responsibility to empower yourself through your own personal
Exactly.
healthy practices, whether it be diet, meditation, exercise, or kind of healthy mindful thinking, as you talked about. Just like Cayce said, thoughts are things. So,
hmm
Dr. Kemp, why do you think so many individuals today are finding such difficulty in becoming their own doctor, their own nutritionist, their own psychotherapist or life coach? With books like yours and countless others out there, and the work of Cayce and so many others, why is the self-empowerment health movement not the norm today? Why are so many still waiting on those who are in power, those in authority, to do it for them rather than taking it upon themselves to do it for themselves?
I think it's the conditioning. It's the conditioning that mankind comes into when we get here. And I think it's sort of the initiation into the physical has been um lackadaisical. It was fragmented, and so people didn't come forth being given the information of who they are as spiritual beings, and that they had this power within them to align themselves. And so when you're not giving the whole story and you only see yourself physically and you're reacting to the social environment around you, not understanding the power of your thoughts and how you are attracting things into your experience, you naturally are going to look outside of yourself. You're thinking it's out there. You're not thinking it's in there. So our indoctrination into the physical has been backwards. And so naturally, when something happens to the body temple, someone gets sick or something like that, they naturally think of it as I need to go see the doctor because something's happened. And then when the doctor gives them the medicine, they're thinking, just take these pills and they'll be fine. The doctor isn't saying, well, here's some affirmations. They're not giving them a holistic approach. They're not saying, what have you been thinking? They're not explaining that their thoughts have manifested into this particular symptomology. And so it's because we have drugstores on every corner, people are looking at the pill as the answer. They're not looking at what they're doing in their own mind and their own hearts. And so this is why in my book I separate the brain from the mind, letting them know the brain is plugged into this mind, this universal mind, this intelligence, this God source that we have. And so because of that, getting people to come back to this holistic knowing that there's a big piece that was missing in their indoctrination into the physical has been daunting, but it has been encouraging at the same time that there are many who are now beginning to embrace this reawakening of consciousness that, oh, you mean this power does exist without inside of me, that I can heal myself. And so, I mean, just like me, I've been out of it for a week. I overdid some things that I needed to take care of, and I didn't run to the doctor because I knew that I needed to think differently. I needed to settle myself. I needed to settle my energy. I needed to rejuvenate and get my internal balance back. And I knew that whatever dis-ease I was experiencing started with a thought, and that I needed to rebalance that. And then eventually I went to the doctor when I couldn't get my throat back to the way I really needed it to. But it was at that point that I knew that that medicine that I would take to assist with me was just an assistance. It wasn't the main thing, but it made me feel so dizzy that I stopped it and decided to just do my own herbal part. But it assisted me enough to get me past it, but not enough for me to feel like this pill was the answer and just keep going. So I've done my prayers and my meditation and all of the other things I needed to do, my massage and all of that, to bring myself back, and I feel much better today. But that's just an example. Most people aren't going, they feel their body temple get out of alignment, and oftentimes they immediately are just running for, where's the aspirin, where's the this, where's the that. They're not stopping and taking a moment to realign and say, okay, what might I have done to get myself out of alignment mentally? What do I need to say to myself to realign and with my mind, body, and spirit to get me back in alignment so that I can feel better and, realign. And so I think if mankind could just take that extra step before you reach for the next aspirin or run to the doctor immediately, first have that talk with yourself and look at what are you doing. And what I was saying on the show, I'm not sure which one of the episodes you listened to, but when I was talking about taking personal responsibility, this is what I mean. If you're going to eat all these foods that you know make you feel sick, and then you're wondering why you feel sick, that just doesn't make sense. Or if you're going to be doing things to your body temple that you know are not in agreement with its well-being, and then you're going to feel badly, that doesn't make sense. And so many people, like smoking, if you know that that's going to cause a problem for you, and then you don't want to do anything about it, and then you're going to complain that the healthcare doesn't cover a certain amount of visits, but you're the one doing it to your body. That type of irresponsibility is something that mankind needs to take a look at. And so I could understand insurance companies not wanting to pay for that. That at some point, each person has to be willing to take responsibility for themselves. And so that's basically where I was coming from with that.
Of course. And it's such an empowering message to hear you speak of that. And then also for you to give an example of how you're applying it in your personal life. Because for our audience who is unaware, you've been feeling a little under the weather as you shared, and you took it upon yourself to realize that it's the thoughts. The thoughts are very much things. As Cayce said, it comes from the spirit, then it comes through the mental, and then it manifests in the physical. So if you're looking for just simply the physical remedy for your problems, you're missing that whole mental, emotional aspect and the understanding that that's coming from, it's coming from spirit, and it's all filtering down inside of you. So thank you for sharing that, because Cayce was also big on the application of spiritual ideas when it comes to healing and holistic health. And without that application, you're missing the picture completely, I feel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And sometimes the message is, for me, I think the message for me this week was I needed to slow down, because my
Right.
husband laughed at me when I said, every time I start doing something, I start feeling bad again. And he's like, well, maybe to take a clue. And I was like, that's so true. So maybe it's just that in my body temple is saying, hey, you need to slow down, and all will be well. And so that's what I'm doing. And so I think it's okay, because we are in such a performance society. Everybody, I keep teasing my clients, you're a human being, not a human doing. And we forget that, because so much praise and everything is on performance. Do, 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 do. And when I'm not doing, I feel, sometimes like, oh God, like, am I being lazy or this and that? And then I have to remind myself, that's right, I'm a human being. I can just be. It's okay to just be. And so your point of what Cayce also underlines there in terms of the application of it, we can't just, as spiritual leaders, we can't just, preach the gospel and not implement these into our own lives too, because when we're given the lesson, we're getting the lesson. And so it's a constant tweaking. We're never there. We're always in pursuit of. And so it's wonderful, though, to have a holistic paradigm. And so many people, the letters that I've gotten have just been tear-jerking letters from people all over the world who've told me that my book has set them free in many, many ways, and it's given them permission to be who they came forth to be, regardless of what the mental or emotional manifestation is. And this one lady, 67, I just never forget her, who just told me she just cried when she read my book, and she just said, if I had had your book, 20 years ago, my whole life would have been different. And that just touched me so much, that whatever she read from my book that restated what she was going through, she had been diagnosed with bipolar. She just said it made the difference. It made the difference. And so, and I just told her, I said, well, you have it now, because you still may be here another 20 years. And now you have this information, and utilizing it and implementing it, may empower you the rest of your days. And so it's those types of stories and testimonies is what keeps me going and lets me know that the work is being sent out. And so, but Cayce, just the volumes. I mean, my God, the volumes that this man wrote, and everything that he's written on mental illness. Allison was so kind to send me the stuff from the library. It's just profound. It's like it's almost amazing because it just lets me know we can come from different places and get this information, because I did not know that he was so on all of this. I mean, he wrote about so many things. And so when we talk about channels and people with the gifts that he have, this is what fortifies my belief. I just love this, and I just feel that what he has offered to mankind, if I can offer just a teeny piece of that, it's life altering is what it is. And I'm just honored to be a part of it, and look forward to the Heal and Be Healed conference that we're going to be doing next month in Virginia there at the ARE. And so it's just wonderful.
Wonderful. And we appreciate having you as a part of the ARE family, because, as you said, you sort of stand on the shoulders of giants. And one of the things I really love about your approach too is that you're a bit of a Renaissance woman, in that you have so many different influences, and you've included so many different sort of healing modalities into your personal practice. And I know in your book you honored quite a list of authors, philosophers, metaphysicians, and healers who have existed in time inside that kind of umbrella of the holistic paradigm. And this is included in the acknowledgement section of your book, from psychotherapy to sacred therapy. So I wanted to ask you, Dr. Kemp, how important is the work of other individuals, as you talk about Cayce and so many others in your book? How important is this work to you as you work yourself to bring your own unique gifts out into the world? And also, I wanted to ask you, can you give us some insight as to maybe some contemporaries who are around today whose work really inspire you daily?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I honor Louise Hay in my book because Louise Hay offered an extensive list of physical diagnoses, where my concentration is on mental health, where I cover all the 170, but she had offered about 14 of them. And so, as a psychotherapist through the years, I would always run to her book because I treat so much chronic illness, but I couldn't find the mental health diagnosis. And so, I ended up having to create many of them on my own with my clients, and we would try it out, and they'd say, "Yeah, this feels right." And so we would do the affirmations that I would create for the specific diagnosis. And so one day, my husband had said, "Well, how many is it?" And I said, "I don't know." And so I went through the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Diagnosis, and realized I had already done almost 100 of them, and found out it was 170. So I said, "Well, hey, I might as well do the whole book." So that's how this got started. And so I stand on the shoulders of giants in the field of alternative and holistic healing, such as um, Carl Jung, his work. I love his work too, because he talks about the archetypes, and he gets into the spiritual ramifications of what specific symptomology could be from that standpoint. But then there's also from the Theosophy Society, we have Charles Leadbetter, and his work was just tremendous in the early days. And Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, my radio stations on Unity station, which Charles and Myrtle Fillmore created, because they were some of the first pioneers too to talk about alternative and holistic healing and the importance of spirituality as a healing agent. And but William Atkinson, he created the first, well, I don't know if he created it, but he's the first who really talked about the law of attraction back in 1906. And even though I love Abraham Hicks' take on it, and they've been doing it for the last 25, 30 years. But it started back in 1906 with William Atkinson. And I just think it's important when we go back and mention these people who was so before their time. They understood this. So this isn't new. You know, we call it new age, but it's not a new age. It's an old age. It's older than Methuselah here. And so when we credit these people like Cayce and all of those back in the day who understood this emphatically, I think we're just building on it. And so, but the contemporaries like Marianne Williamson and Deepak Chopra and Carolyn Nice and Ayanna Van Zandt and Wayne Dyer, God rest his soul, all of these people understood what we're talking about here. And it's a mighty list, actually. I think I mentioned about 50 or 60 in my acknowledgments, but it's probably more, and that's why I credit those who names I may not know, because truth is truth. It doesn't change. And so sometimes people, I know that someone had accused Wayne Dyer of copying one of the people from Japan, from the I Ching or China, and I resented that inclination that they were saying, because I think people mix up like-mindedness with copying. Like-mindedness means that we come to the same conclusions based on similar information, and since we've come into the world with similar conditioning, we're going to draw some of the same conclusions if we're vibrating at a higher resonance. And so those who've been vibrating at this higher resonance have come to very similar conclusions. And I love knowing that. And just like my work, I didn't even know that Cayce was doing all this. And so much of it is similar in the conclusions that I've come to as well, that he was able to tap into at a much, much earlier state. And so I think that it's important that we understand that like does attract like, and that we do, once we've read so much of the information that's out there by the pioneers, many of us are going to draw some of these same conclusions. And so I think that those have been my primary influences that made me. In fact, I think it was Louise Hay and Esther Hicks. They actually gave me the courage to go ahead and write my book, knowing that it was against the traditional paradigm, because they were willing to tell their truths. And Louise Hay's work is what set me free. I used to faint all the time when I was a child, and until I was 21, I think it was. And I read her book about these affirmations, and I couldn't understand how I'd been to specialists all over the world, not all over the world, but all over the city that I lived in, that my parents dragged me to. But they were specialists who worked all over the world, and they couldn't heal me. And it wasn't until I found out about her book and started doing the affirmations for fainting that I stopped fainting, and I couldn't understand how saying some words could stop me from fainting. And that's when I started researching metaphysics deeply and realized it wasn't that I was saying the words that stopped me from fainting. It was I had changed my thoughts, that it started at the level of thought, and that's when it got exciting to me. I was like, oh, this is what's happening here. And from there, my life was transformed. And so I know emphatically that this works, personally, and have seen it in so many clients. It's just not even funny. And so this is why I'm a believer in this paradigm, the holistic paradigm, and prescribe it regularly, and will continue to do so, because it's really powerful. It's not a bunch of hocus pocus or foolishness that some of the traditionalists would have people believe. And so it really is something to it. And I really suggest more people look into it and not just take one person's word for something, that they do their own research, because all this stuff was available all of my life. And had I done my own research earlier, I would have healed earlier. But sometimes, like we were talking about at the beginning of the interview, we let leaders say something, or we let experts say something, and we take their word and swallow it whole versus investigating it. And so I strongly suggest people look into it. Don't take my word for it. Don't take Casey's word for it. Try these principles out on your own, and take your own word for it, because God is in you too, and you have thought, and you have wisdom, and you have the intelligence to dissect these principles for yourself and to determine whether or not they work for you or not.
Absolutely. Wonderful advice. And one thing I love that you also mention so often in your work is that all of this knowledge and all this information is built into your DNA. It's really built into the core foundation of who we are. And learning to tap into that inner guidance is absolutely an essential key for what we need right now when it comes to a holistic approach to health. And you mentioned kind of what we had started out with the whole kind of environment, the whole weather of what's going on in America right now in the political scene. And you touch on another topic. I'm a big fan of your show, and on your show you had touched a little bit on the idea kind of that as Americans, we oftentimes take things for granted, and things like our individual rights and our basic freedoms that are guaranteed to us in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Also, things like the unconditional love that's shared among so many friends and family members here in America, that we get to enjoy these incredible things. And the abundance also that so many of us get to enjoy in our daily life and respect our physical needs. And of course, the luxuries that many of us are fortunate enough to enjoy as well. So I wanted to ask you, Dr. Kent, what is your take on why we may fall victim in America to a lack of appreciation of the things that many other parts of the world may never ever get to experience in their lives? And also, I was wondering if you could give our audience a little advice into how they could cultivate in their personal life a more lasting kind of deepened appreciation of all that we truly are blessed with.
I think that with regards to the first question, with regards to why there's a little lack of appreciation here, I think it's lack of exposure. And I think that, we come forth with a sense of entitlement, which is valuable in the sense that we are entitled to the riches and all that God has given us. And I like the fact, when I was the director of mental health for the school board, they would ask me that, these kids have such a sense of entitlement, and they felt it was terrible. And I said, no, this isn't terrible. This is good that they understand that they're entitled to the best, and that there should be an ease that comes with the receiving of the abundance of the universe. At the same time, I think that when it comes to the comparative analysis of looking at third world countries or other places where this abundance doesn't seem to have been as great as it is here in America, oftentimes because there's lack of exposure to that, unless they watch the History Channel or see some of these late night infomercials that are asking for support in these countries with the life conditions there, that it's hard for people to bridge that, because there's such degrees of well-being and there's such degrees of living in the world that it's hard for someone who's living without being affected by any lack at all to fathom lack in other areas. And so bringing it to their attention, as I try to do on my show and you're doing on your show and so many shows, that we understand the need for more appreciation because it could be different. Just bringing it into a person's awareness and reminding them that, hey, there's such diversity on the planet. And did you know, for instance, that there are people who, you have on these shoes that you're complaining about, but do you know that there's some people who are shoeless right now? And
Right.
from that standpoint, not to make them feel bad about the abundance of the shoes they're wearing, but for the appreciation for the shoes they're wearing. Whereas, my parents were famous for eat those peas because there are kids out here who don't have no food. And that did not make me want to eat my peas more. they were trying to use a guilt approach at the table to make me eat those peas. But if we don't come with it with a shaming clause, there's no need to shame us for the abundance that one has found, but instead, the comparative analysis being just about diversity. That, wow, isn't it incredible that there's diverse ways to be human here, and that there are some people who came forth who are choosing life experiences where abundance was not a part of what they needed in terms of material things. And that, isn't it amazing that many of them are still finding the joy of living and just being, and not doing and acquiring. And when we put it in more holistic, sacred terms, I think then appreciation can be amassed, because then the person with the greater material reality isn't feeling shaming or any like they have to give up something, because we're not talking about that, because there are many paths, as you know, spiritual paths that believe that material things are terrible, and they prescribe to their congregants that they don't need these things, and that less is more, and that type of thing. And so sometimes material things were looked at as non-spiritual, and I don't agree with that either. I feel that abundance, is a major part of the creation process, because I always say, until I see one leaf on a tree or one blade of grass, I'm believing that God is in the prosperity business, because it's so much abundance. Everything that the Creator seems to do is a lot. And so abundance has its place in the world. And so from that standpoint, I think our appreciation of wherever we are on the planet, and whatever we have acquired or we seek as part of our happiness, whether it's material, physical, or whatever, is important. But in terms of the other areas of the world where people have simply not tapped into that type of thing, I feel that too must be by divine intention. I don't see it as necessarily lack. I see it as diversity, as part of the whole, and that they're maybe helping magnify for us an understanding that so much of what we have is maybe not necessary to be happy, but it's an abundance of it that adds to it, but that it takes so little. I don't know if you saw the video I did for the song I wrote called I'm Good Enough. And I have this little boy in Africa in the video where he's just playing with some boxes that he made drums out of. And he's playing those things with all that he has within him. I mean, he is in it and he's happy. And that comes in where the lyric says, that it takes very little, that I'm good enough right here. And so in that, I'm hoping that appreciation for wherever we are and whatever we have can be amassed through understanding versus shame. Because when we use it as shame in comparative analysis, I think it hurts people and it injures them, and it makes them think that they're doing something wrong, and that they aren't deserving of the things that they've acquired, and they are. But it's just a matter of understanding that there's a tremendous diversity out here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Dr. Kemp, as sort of a final question, it's a very personal question for me. I love your work, and I love the diversity in your work. And one thing that I feel doesn't get talked about enough is your work as a musician and as a singer. So from one musician to another, I wanted to ask you what it means to you to be able to express yourself as a soul through music and through your form of singing. And then also, as a second kind of follow-up question to that, what are your thoughts on the state of popular music today?
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for asking me that, because no one ever does ask me about that part.
I had a
and
feeling.
and
I
I
had a
didn't know
feeling.
you were a musician. What do you play?
I
Are
play
you a
drums
singer
and
too?
bass. Yeah, drums and bass, and then I'm a singer myself as well.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, outstanding. Um, well, I think that because what I love about being a singer most is the vibrational resonance of it. Because I'm such a metaphysician, I see everything energetically. when I'm singing, I feel it. Just like when I'm doing Tai Chi, I literally feel the energy. And so when I'm singing the words, when I write a song for whatever the cause, we just did a beautiful project for female genital mutilation for 30 nations in Africa. And when I wrote those lyrics and was singing that song, I felt it. And the people who are part of the music video that we did, they felt it too. And that's what I think, if we can feel well-being, if because the song is to uplift it, I'm mostly on the solution of things versus the problem of it. So the song's all about the solution. And so in creating lyrics, I like music that heals, that realigns, that brings people back into an awareness in a way that my books and my lectures can't tap into. The way music is this universal language. And throughout most music, at some point, the resonance of Om is in it. Somewhere in it, you will hear Om, because we have to get into the oohs and the ahs and all of the scale. And so I'm always listening for that, as to where in this song, whether it's mine or someone else's, does it reconnect me to the source. And for me, that's what my music, I've been described more as a folk singer because I sing the songs of the people. So my music is more therapeutic than entertainment, because it's trying to realign and remind people of their connection to the source. And so when I'm listening to popular music, I like all types of music as long as it has a message. I'm not, even if I'm dancing, because I love to dance because that's vibrational for me too. I'm moving the body temple and I like all the way it feels if I'm dancing fast. But even music that's fast dancing music, if it's saying something in the lyrics that realigns mankind to the source, it takes me higher than reading any word could possibly do. And so that's why I'm getting more into it. This is why we created UR2.global as an arts medium to continue this work, because I saw how fast in my retreats that I do in Sedona or the mountains, a lot of times I saw that when we add the music therapy to it, people got there faster. And so I started including it more, and sure enough, people healed faster and they got more out of it. And so I said, how could I do it in a more expansive way? So UR2.global is the extension of that, trying to use sacred therapy through music. And so I said, well, maybe we can just sort of sing a line of the book in each song, so to speak. And so that's what that project is all about. But it's mostly for social projects. So I write songs to uplift different types of ones. So one on the self-esteem was the song I'm Good Enough. And then the song called Leave Me Be was written for female genital mutilation with the Global Women Foundation that we coordinated that with. And so it's those types of works that I'm working on, that I'm enjoying and hope to do more of. I thought that trauma is what took me away from music early, and healing others is what brought me back. So it's been a divine work, and I thank God to allow me to be able to use my voice at this juncture in my career. Thanks for asking me
Absolutely.
that, though. That was wonderful.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate everything that you do, and especially you don't get to see that unique gift brought out. You hear so much about the health and all the health, and to hear that you really are a Renaissance woman and dabble in so many different projects. So thank you for mentioning that, and thank you for sharing all that with us. I want to encourage all of our audience to visit drmeliakemp.com to learn more about all the things we've talked about. And of course, we've touched on so many topics, but there are so much more included in your book, From Psychotherapy to Psychotherapy. So please check out her website and get a copy of that book for yourself. It's an incredibly thorough book that I think, as you mentioned, can really help to change your personal paradigm when it comes to healing and health. And as Dr. Amelia Kemp also mentioned, she is a featured presenter at the new ARE conference, Heal and Be Healed. And that's from September 23rd through the 25th of this year, 2016. And that'll be here in Virginia Beach. So we'll make sure that we give you the links at the end of the show to go ahead and register for that. So Dr. Amelia Kemp, thank you so much for giving us time today. Even when you are a bit under the weather, we appreciate you pushing through with us, and I appreciate what you're doing, and we're so honored to have you as a part of the ARE family. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. You have a wonderful week now.
Thank you. Likewise.
Take care now. Bye bye.
It's time for the thought for the day today again, here on Reflections, the wisdom of Edgar Cayce. Joining me to indulge in the thought for the day today from the Cayce readings is Dr. Bill Austin. Bill, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on again.
Good morning, Brent. Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, my pleasure. And if you can go ahead and read the excerpt from the Cayce readings that we picked out for the thought for the day today.
I'd be happy to. This thought for the day comes from reading 1276-1. For know all power, all influence that is of a creative nature is of the Father God a manifestation, not as an individual, not as a personality, but as good, as love, as law, as long-suffering, as patience, as brotherly love, as kindness, as gentleness, yet in all the beauties of nature, in the blush of the rose, in the baby's smile, in the song of the bird, in the ripple of the brook, in the wind, in the wave, in all those influences or forces that bring to his creatures a consciousness of life itself and its awareness and its activity in a material plane. This is so poetic, isn't it? You know, he's telling us that in this world that we live in, there are reflections of these creative forces that are pure reflections. And we see it in some of the attributes, I'll say the attributes of the divine within us, you know, of being good, brotherly love, as law, long-suffering, patience, kindness, gentleness. These are reflections of the divine working through the individual. An individual
Absolutely.
who became a good friend, Charles Thomas Cayce, used to tell me that when he needed to get in touch with his inner self and he was having trouble, he'd go for a walk. He'd go out into nature. You know, and in this reading, it talks about, you know, the blush of the rose, the ripple of the brook, the wind, the wave, you know, all of the forces in nature that are a reflection. And one of the most beautiful is the baby's smile. Baby smile. Earlier today, I was in a situation where I was out at the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, and there were at least 150 people there. It really got crowded. And it's a stressful situation. And I was trying to keep my head together. And I noticed there was a woman walking around holding her baby and, you know, kind of bouncing the baby. And this baby had the biggest smile on its face. And you could see the ripple of this smile go through this tense crowd that was sitting there waiting, you know, wondering when we're going to get through and everything. But as soon as this baby's smile hit you, everything just melted away. You know, and Cayce is telling us in this reading that just look around. Just take a breath. You know, when you're feeling a little tight, take a breath, look around, and see the reflections of the manifestation of God in other people, in nature. It's all around. We just have to stop and look and accept it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bill. And thank you for sharing that little bit about Charles Thomas. That was great to hear, and it really resonated with me because that was something that I got that was actually came from this kind of this Cayce philosophy, is that the importance of the simple things in life, and And it was a reminder to me when you said that about Charles, how he always would go out when he was having trouble connecting with himself, he would go out and take a walk in nature. And for me, that is the most powerful tool, I think, one of the most powerful tools that I have for reconnecting with what's going on inside of me and to really realign myself. So thank you for that, because that reminds me that I need to go on more walks. What I love about this, like I said, is it's just a reminder to enjoy the simple things in life, and these simple things, as Casey said in this excerpt, are always to be found right in front of us. And far too often, I think we overlook the simple things that are in front of us, really greeting us and helping to facilitate that joy of the simplicity of life, because we kind of, maybe for me personally, I will fail to question what we are told is important. So you have these external influences, whether it be, peers or the media or any sort of influence that comes across in your life. And a lot of times they'll dictate to you what's important. And a lot of times the important thing is the dollar, or, things that maybe aren't necessarily helping to facilitate our inner spiritual growth, but rather can be used sometimes as a distraction or cover up from the simplicity that's always around us. The other thing you mentioned was the baby, and for me, that's a very near and dear experience that I've been going through over the past year. I have my personal experience with my 1-year-old nephew. It's my first nephew, and that smile and the bursts of laughter, just uncontrollable laughter, that can cure any toxic thoughts that are going on in my mind, and it really helps to bring me back into the moment, back into the now. And the beauty of babies and young children is that they haven't been socialized yet to leave the now. They're always in that present moment in the now, and it's such a powerful energy that they're creating, that it'll pull you in, and then you drop into the now. You drop into the moment and the simplicity that entails. And so often that's something that I find myself falling out of, with the daily stresses of things that are pulling you in every direction.
Right.
One other thing I really like about this is it's a reminder that there's kind of a vast universal spirit out there that's ever ready to work through us and help guide us on our often confusing journey. The answers aren't always clear, and there's this animating force that allows us to accomplish great things. And the extent to which this force is made manifest through our journey is wholly dependent on our willingness to participate fully in life, remaining mindful of our thoughts and actions. So participating fully in life, to me, is really embracing every aspect, especially the simple aspects that are so often overlooked.
Yes. That's a good word. Embrace it. See it.
Absolutely.
And embrace it. And boy, it's life changing. It's moment changing. It can really be uplifting. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, Bill. And it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. So thank you so much for joining us for the Thought for the Day again today. And I look forward to having you on next time.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It's always fun. It's always uplifting. I'll try to embrace it.
Absolutely. Well, have a great day, Bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.